Hello! Today's writing is based on this picture. You're going to enter a creative writing competition, write a description suggested by this picture. Now, although I've encouraged you in previous videos to not be rooted in the picture itself, the writing I'm going to show you does come directly from this picture because it's taken from a student's work. And the other thing I want to draw your attention to is this line that I didn't read out. Your entry will be judged by a panel of people of your own age. Now that's really dangerous because it will encourage you to use a less advanced vocabulary and less sophisticated sentences. So just be aware, whatever the examiner says here about people your own age, you're actually writing for the examiner. So you want the language to be as well crafted and formal as possible. Okay, the most important thing about any piece of description, in fact, any writing that you do, is that your sentences need to start in different ways. And the easiest way to do that is to start with different words. There you have it, highlighted in yellow. Air, approached, along, underneath, clouds, a, turbulence, absorbing, agile, the, lightning, it's, this, the, terrified, this. So you can see that before we get to a boring word, the is a long way through the writing. Going back to it, I did agonize about this sentence here. You know, I might have aimed for a different this, a difference from this, I should say. A really interesting thing that I hadn't noticed when I wrote it, but remember I was using another student's work, is that so many of these begins with A. It's quite an interesting stylistic feature that I've not come across before. And it's happened because this student was using a thesaurus and thinking so carefully about their language, and they've definitely thought more about words that begin with the letter A for whatever reason. Right, your next top writing technique is to concentrate on your use of verbs. Verbs carry all the energy of your writing, all the passion. They slow things down or speed things up. I'm going to read through it and talk about each verb once we've done a sentence. Air pressurized like steam, fit to burst from a hot spring. So pressurized and burst immediately signals to us that this is going to be a dramatic piece, and that the air is going to feature prominently. We can infer from this that a storm is probably coming. Approached by a sea storm, the coastline's edge was aligned with tracks. Along the tracks an oncoming train seemed to slow. Underneath, waves grew with the tempest's fury. So what happens next is much more gentle, and that use of contrast is always really sophisticated. On the one hand, you've got the imminent danger, then we've got this soft-sounding verbs like slowing, aligned, very neutral, until the hint of danger coming, the tempest's fury. But I haven't highlighted it because it's not a verb. Clouds formed, again neutral, engulfing sunlight in an ominous dusk. Engulfing is suddenly threatening and much more powerful. A fearsome wind hit, the passengers clutching onto their seats. So now we know trouble is coming. The more powerful verbs are coming much more quickly, so it increases the pace. Hit and clutching are both violent. Turbulence rose, again neutral, until the gale soared upwards, so it's gaining in power, and then pierce the roiling clouds. Now pierce is dangerous, and it's got associations with pain, and so we can immediately infer the danger that this storm is bringing with it. Absorbing darkness, the sea current accelerated, and again that word is not only powerful, it adds to these verbs that we've just looked at that are increasing in pace because they're happening more frequently. Agile streams of air hustled the clouds, spiking their grudge. The truculence of the storm contorted the sea. And you can see how carefully this writer has thought about the use of verbs. The clouds are being personified here because they are literally spiking the grudge of, oh, sorry, no. The clouds have a grudge, they're personified. Their anger is being spiked by the air, which is hustling them. And so now the storm itself becomes like a thinking being that's determined to attack the sea. And the sea itself is contorted through this verb, contorted, personified through this verb, because when you contort a face, that's what we associate with contort with an expression. And if the sea has an expression, it must be human-like. Lightning slammed down with raucous thunder. Its surges purged from the sky, striking the waters ferociously, so that a mountainous spout shrouded the train. Again, you can see how this rhythm of verbs is really building up the pace of danger. Again, it's violence with striking, and this writer again is using the associations we have. So a shroud is a cover, but it's also a cover that we typically put over a coffin, or in historical times over a dead body, and therefore it has all these associations with death, and that immediately forces us to see the power of the storm is likely to kill people on the train. And this is another example of how the verbs help you to show, not tell. This flood separated the pummeled carriages, swamping them in a deluge. The carriages lugged onward. Brilliant use of lugged here, because it shows how heavy the carriages are, and therefore a massive contrast to how agile the storm is, and it suggests that the train will never be able to escape. But then we've got this horrifying image: the carriages bulldozed each other. So bulldozed is brilliant. It's clearing everything in its path, very destructive. And here the train is, if you like, killing itself. One carriage piling into the next, and so on. Terrified and distressed, the trapped passengers could not escape. Now the verb is hopeful, but it's married with this word not. And we know that people on the train are going to die. Now we get verbs which show us how horrifically they die. Shards of windows pierced through flesh, severing with festering wounds. Really violent use. Instead of cutting, which is quite a powerful word in itself, severing is much more dramatic. This amputated train began to drown. And we've got a horrifying death that we can all imagine. So not only are they suffering this incredible pain that we got from the earlier verbs, we can now imagine a slow and painful death through drowning. Another vital thing I want you to notice is that the writer has used barely any adverbs. And this is really brilliant advice. Often when you're describing, you tend to chuck adverbs in everywhere because they describe the verb much better. But the problem with too many adverbs is that it slows down the pace of your writing, and it again tells the reader too much. So the only one I've kept here is ferociously, and even there, I could happily get rid of that, really. And Stephen King, one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, it says exactly that: get rid of all your adverbs, you really don't need them. Probably the next feature of descriptive writing is an intelligent use of adjectives. So let's have a look at these. You can see that they're not everywhere, and if you look at them as a pattern, they build up in intensity towards the end, which kind of helps build towards a crescendo, a climax. So let's have a look. The hot spring, nothing particularly dramatic, just factual. Sea storm, again factual. Oncoming, again just factual, before it then starts to change the mood. Now it becomes ominous. The wind is fearsome. The clouds are roiling. And so hopefully you can see how they're building up in intensity here. Then you've got a contrast, agile, and we've seen how important that is, the agile air, in comparison to the very slow trains which bulldoze and lugged. So very, very skillful use there. Raucous, so we've got the senses brought in there. Mountainous, we've got the sound. Pummeled tells us how powerful this storm is. And then we look at the effect on the passengers: terrified, distressed, trapped. And listing adjectives here is a really dangerous thing to do frequently. And this writer is showing excellent control now because it's just for impact at this crucial moment. And then the wounds themselves are festering, a really horrible word, horrible image, which exactly fits the mood. And that's carried on by the train itself being amputated in this brilliant personification where we associate the amputated train, obviously, with the amputated body parts caused by this exploding glass everywhere. Okay, next we need to look at those traditional descriptive techniques, which you've probably been taught as SOAP aims: simile, onomatopoeia, alliteration, personification, adjectives, imagery, metaphor, and the senses. So what you've already learned about the powerful verbs have all created imagery. And so that's already taken care of here. Let's have a look at what I've highlighted in this green color. Like steam, obviously we have a simile, and it works here. It gives us the idea of power and danger, and that's emphasized with to burst, which is an onomatopoeic word, burst. I've left all the yellows, which are adjectives, again already in SOAP aims. Sea storm. This is alliteration. Does it help? Well, it's a particular kind of alliteration. It's called sibilance, where you repeat the S sound, and it actually mimics the sound of the steam here, doesn't it? Sea storm. It's got that hiss to it. So it's a really effective piece of sibilance, alliteration. Here, train tracks. Well, actually, we might infer that that's not that deliberate. Train and tracks go together anyway. But it is a harsh sound. T, t, and then the harsh C sound, which again is repeated here, does add to that sense of finality. And we get an impression that this is not going to end well. It's going to end finally, perhaps with death. The tempest's fury. Well, here we have obvious personification. Only people, well, I suppose you could argue animals, but we're really dealing with a person here when we think of the fury. The ominous dusk. Again, we've got that sibilance at work there, which is reflected with sunlight. Notice that all the words don't have to be jam-packed together. When they are put together, it's too much like childish writing, and spreading them out within your sentence is often more effective. Here we've got no new techniques other than the ones that I've already mentioned. Absorbing darkness, the sea current accelerated. Again, the repetition of those harsh sounds, that alliteration, emphasizes the danger and finality. We've already looked at how the air is personified here, hustling the clouds, and again personified in spiking their grudge. And in a brilliant move here, the clouds themselves are personified because they also have a grudge. And actually, I didn't highlight this one, but the storm has a truculence. That again is a human characteristic, which is personification. And if the sea is contorted, it's normally bodies that contort and definitely facial expressions. So that again is personification. Lightning slammed down. Again, this is an onomatopoeic word. The sky striking, that sibilance again. Here, again, echoing with the harsh K sounds, making it sound more threatening. And spout, we got the S of mountainous, spout, shrouded. Again, it reminds us of that earlier hiss, like from the steam, and it's becoming more and more dangerous. And then this technique is used again towards the end, flesh severing, festering wounds. And that kind of slicing sound mimics what's going on here with the exploding glass. And then finally, we have the metaphor, which is also personification of the train beginning to drown. So I'm quite breathless now reading that because the writer has put so many in. And what you'll notice is that there are many examples in each sentence. The writer doesn't just think, oh, I'll put techniques in every now and again. Different techniques in each sentence. Remember that when you're learning, you'll put too much of the same technique. You'll have too many adjectives, or you'll have too many adverbs, or too much alliteration in the same sentence. And what brilliant writers do is they combine techniques. Another thing that you'll probably notice is that personification is much the more sophisticated verb of a form of a metaphor, and a metaphor is more sophisticated than a simile. And what you've seen here is it begins with a simile, moves into metaphor, but actually does so much more through personification. And that's a much more powerful way of raising the quality of your descriptive writing. So what you'll notice that's missing, obviously, is the use of the senses. And the reason the senses are missing is because this writer is really sophisticated. So pay attention here. Many students, when they're using the senses, invent sounds and smells just for the sake of using them, because they think, oh, I must include the senses. But actually, what top writing does is it gives you an impression of what those senses are. For example, with this image of the steam, we can imagine that there is a lot of noise involved in this storm. With the alliteration that we looked at earlier, we get the hiss of the storm. With the onomatopoeia of slammed, we get the sound that must be happening. The sound doesn't have to be described. Again, the adjective raucous tells us that it's noisy. We don't need a precise description of that noise. Again, from the truculence of the storm, we understand that the storm is angry, and from that we infer a sound. The air is hustling the clouds. From that we infer a wind, don't we? And we could hear it. It's spiking their grudge. We get a sense of thunder coming just from that description. And again, the sky striking the waters. Well, how would the sky strike the waters? Well, with wind and thunder. I mean, we imagine the sound there without it being spelled out to us. And that's really, really sophisticated writing. We get a sense of touch through this final description here. You can almost feel the glass cutting through the flesh because of that excellent sibilance we looked at, and this brilliant pair of words, severing and festering. We can literally feel the pain from that, can't we? And then that's added to by amputated. And finally, with the senses, you'll notice there are no smells, and that's because smell simply wouldn't be appropriate in this description. We're watching the storm, and the smell would be a redundant piece of description that would take away from the drama and the realism of what we're looking at. And the final thing I want you to show you here, it's really the icing on the cake of writing, is the attention this writer has paid to the sound of words. By repeating sound patterns, you both emphasize things and make the language more memorable. You know, you'll come away from this piece having remembered some of the words simply because of the way the sound patterns repeat themselves. So we have this internal rhyme, surges purged, terrific energy there. Then we've got the assonance of the repeated vowel sounds, mountainous spout shrouded. And that ow, ow, ow sound is itself suggestive of pain, isn't it? Just through that repeated sound. And then again, we have the assonance of the S sound in flesh, severing, festering. Really harsh sounding vowels which mimic the harshness of what's being described. And good writers do that almost without thinking. They get these patterns of sound, and one word suggests the sound of an X, which suggests the sound of the next. And it works almost like music. These repetitive sounds bring great drama to your writing. So let's finish this video in under the 20 minutes. These are the 11 things that I've taught you Test yourself by going to the description. You'll find them all listed there beneath this video. Don't forget to subscribe. Good luck, good writing.